Now that we have a nice, let's say, perspective view, you might want to add, some furnitures here, but let's do a render. So type, if you're in a 3D view, you can see this teapot icon. So show rendering dialog. So you can click that and a dialog box appear. So there you go. You can also type RR. So if you type RR, that's the shortcut for this dialog box. So you can render this. Normally you render initially using a draft rendering. So the render will not take too long. So draft. So you render to the screen. You can render to a printer. The size, the pixel is the size of your crop box. Okay. So currently we are in an interior space. So instead of exterior sun, you want to say use the lighting from the sun. Let's say maybe there's some light coming from the window, especially if it's a bigger window. So interior sun and artificial. Artificial means these lights that we have added here. So these lights are not just models of lights, they're actually light source when you do a render. Okay. So when you're lighting using the sun, you can always click on this button and set the under steel, set the time of day. Okay. Click OK. So we're using artificial light, and for artificial light, these are the lights that are inserted. So if they are turned on, okay, you have a value of 1. Okay, so you can control those lights. So right now, we don't have that much light, so we'll just render this based on the lighting we have here. And then you can start a render. So initially you use a draft render. Once you're satisfied, you might want to commit yourself to a full render. Now, don't worry if your scene is a little bit dark. You can actually adjust the exposure of the image. So you click adjust exposure, like your camera, you can go brighter, apply. Okay, I think the shadows is too dark, but we can't do much about that. Highlight, maybe make it brighter, and maybe make this a little bit darker. Okay, so you do need to take note of where your light source is, and how shadows will be casted when you're doing renderings. So that's not a bad render. Click OK. And here you need to save this render. If you're happy with the render, most probably you might render using a high render resolution like medium, high, best. Okay. Once you're happy with the rendering and all the settings that you've done, you can save this to a project so that it becomes a view or an image that can be placed in your sheet. Okay, so name that, and there's your rendering. And you can also export this as a JPEG file. So you can use it anywhere you want as a JPEG file. Okay, you can say show model, show rendering. But once you get away or out of this dialog box, okay, and you hit render again, notice that the show rendering is gone. So that's temporarily saved until you close this dialog box. Okay, so that's our exercise for today. Submit your Revit file in the designated Dropbox.